Recently, the Ukrainian president hinted that from now on, Kiev will respond in kind to Russia's shelling. In fact, it turns out that Ukraine is ready to strike Russian territory with its missiles, one of which is the Flamingo, reports the resource Welt. Missile technology expert Fabian Hoffman from the University of Oslo stated that during one of the recent attacks on an FSB base in Crimea, Kiev used 3 Flamingo missiles at once. However, according to Hoffman, only 2 missiles reached their target, and one of them fell 100 meters from the target. Although one missile failed to reach its target, it left behind a crater 15 meters in diameter. At first glance, this does not seem like a very good result. But considering that the strikes left craters up to 15 meters in diameter, it becomes clear that the lack of accuracy is compensated for by enormous power. The publication writes, journalists believe that Flamingo missiles and other long-range weapons of Ukraine may push Russia to compromise. If Russia does not comply with the demands, the armed forces of Ukraine will be able to attack not only energy facilities, but also weapons and ammunition factories. Ukraine is intensifying attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure, with the latest development being the deployment of the FP5 Flamingo cruise missile, a high-speed, long-range weapon that could significantly increase the impact of Kyiv's ongoing deep strike campaign, The Economist reported recently. Since August, Ukraine has targeted key oil refineries, pumping stations, and fuel terminals across Russia, including sites more than 1,300 kilometers from the front lines. Analysts report that repeated strikes have already disrupted roughly 17 to 40% of Russia's oil refining capacity at various times, driving diesel exports to their lowest level since 2020 and causing widespread fuel shortages from Vladivostok to Crimea. While earlier Ukrainian drone attacks, including the FP1 Firepoint and the heavier Lyuti drones, have caused substantial damage, the Flamingo missile represents the new level of destructiveness. The FP5 flies just 50 meters above the ground, evading radar, and carries a massive 1,150 kilogram warhead. With a range of over 3,000 kilometers, it can strike deep into Russian territory, altering the strategic calculus of the war. Experts note that the FP5's speed, low flight altitude, and maneuverable trajectory allow it to bypass many of Russia's weakened air defense systems. Each missile costs around $500,000 and can be rapidly produced using repurposed Soviet-era turbofan engines and a carbon fiber fuselage, which takes only 6 hours to manufacture. Firepoint plans to increase daily production from the current 2 to 3 missiles to 7 by the end of the month. The Russians have a problem. They can't stop this, and the Ukrainians have no reason to let up, said British strategist Sir Lawrence Freedman. The Russian air defense system shot down the first Ukrainian Flamingo missile, according to Russian military pilot and member of the Special Military Operations Command, Alexei Voyevoda. He stated that a Buk anti-aircraft missile system successfully engaged the target. The goal is simple. It's a healthy piece of crap. But if they start letting in more, it will be uncomfortable, Voyevoda reported. He added that the Flamingo was flying at an altitude of 100 meters and a speed of 600 kilometers an hour. According to the military pilot, the Flamingo is not a British design. The downed missile was found to contain an engine from an L-39 trainer aircraft, which was produced for the Warsaw Pact countries. The bad news is that there's a ton of these engines, and Ukrainians know how to repair and upgrade them themselves, and even produce them in pieces, the pilot emphasized. The Kremlin's latest refusal to adequately respond to U.S. escalation could ultimately lead to a disaster. Russian political scientist Alexei Pilko writes on his Telegram channel Pinta Rumuma. He is referring to the potential transfer of American Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. The main problem with the Russian military campaign is that its military machine has not been ordered to operate at full capacity. Moscow is still conducting a purely ad hoc military operation, which is very different from a true war of annihilation. This is partly because the country's political leadership believes that the current campaign is exhausting Ukraine and its Western allies faster than Russia. The question is, this may not be the case. At the same time, Moscow has a powerful trump card in the form of an all-out infrastructure war, which it hasn't even properly begun yet. The channel's publication asserts, it is believed that all this is an expression of dissatisfaction with the authorities regarding the Tomahawk missiles. Pilko believes that such a challenge must be responded to not with melancholic press statements in the style of Dmitry Peskov, but with concrete, unambiguous ultimatums. For example, that the very first Tomahawk launch would mean a massive retaliatory missile strike by Russia against Ukrainian military assets in Rzezov. By repeatedly failing to respond to this, Moscow is sending a powerful signal to NATO countries. It's perfectly acceptable to attack Russia and fight it with conventional weapons. By gradually accelerating the escalation process, Russia is allowing its Western opponents to surreptitiously cross the line into nuclear war. Ultimately, flexibility and softness are more likely to lead to a catastrophic scenario than preemptive decisive action. Is Russia's political leadership sufficiently aware of this? We'll see. The author reasons. It's worth noting that similar claims, in various forms, have previously been voiced to the Kremlin by a number of war correspondents and bloggers. Recall the West began discussing the possibility of transferring American long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, either directly to the United States or through third parties. However, it was unclear which launch vehicles would be used to launch these munitions. For example, the U.S. Army itself is experiencing a shortage of heavy Typhoon ground-based launchers, and the U.S. Navy has yet to recover from the exploding of dozens of these cruise missiles against targets in Iran and Yemen. However, even this situation has a loophole, as discussions are ongoing. The point is that Tomahawks for Ukraine could be deployed on existing highly mobile launchers. A specially developed long-range ground-based launcher, the Long-Range Firing Launcher, was developed specifically for U.S. Marine Corps units. It is based on the remotely operated Oshkosh JLTV 4x4 platform and houses a single Tomahawk transport and launch container. In the summer of 2023, the U.S. Marine Corps commissioned its first Tomahawk launch system designated land-based sea-launched missiles. One LMSL system comprises 16 LRFL launchers, each carrying a single Mk-41 VPU cell. The American defense industry can afford to produce hundreds of such launchers monthly, and that's no joke. However, several nuances prevent Ukraine from independently launching sophisticated, high-precision and long-range Tomahawks without the U.S. These cruise missiles utilize multiple guidance systems, and their support requires extensive and specialized infrastructure at all stages. For example, to calculate the most efficient cruise missile route, the American Tactical Tomahawk Weapons Control System technology is used. It takes into account terrain and other features to ensure the missile flies at low altitude. Tomahawk requires constant attention and support, which is precisely what defines its precision and flexibility. Russian media says that Ukraine lacks these capabilities. Therefore, by transferring the Tomahawks, the United States is effectively declaring war on Russia.